Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next webinar of Strong Women in IT, where we present and promote knowledge and wonderful women from our Strong Women in IT community. Today, we are going to talk about startup and VC, how really looks like the way we fund money, how we are raising money, and we have great guests that will answer to all of our questions. So if you have questions regarding how it is best prepare pitch deck, what is important to raise money, how our guests make the mistakes, and what is the key way to success in raising money. I'm sure that they will gonna to answer. So without further ado, Cecile, Wiktoria, I'm so happy that you agreed to be with us today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, Cecile. So can we start with you, and you can introduce us more about what are you doing, what's your experience, and what's your responsibilities in Pitango?
Yes, of course. So I'm based in Tel Aviv in Israel, and I'm a part of a fund called Pitango Venture Capital, which is really a family of funds. Pitango was founded first in the early 90s, so it's been around for about 28 years, and we're investing out of our 11th fund by now. So it's quite a long history. And we've had about $3 billion under management that we invest. We are a generalist venture capital fund, although one of our three parallel funds is a health tech fund that invests in health, which also includes food tech, for example, anything that related to health. We're investing mostly in Israeli startups. So this is our bread and butter, Israeli or Israeli related. We do allocate a little bit of capital outside of Israel, but usually this is our biggest advantage as well in Israel. As I said, Pitango is a mainstream VC, which means that it's raising capital from LPs to maximize profits. It has no specific mandate to do anything except maximizing profits. However, since 2014, Pitango has been involved in impact investing. So from 2014, Pitango joined me in a different organization called Impact First Investments, where I invested in early stage startups that are impact tech startups. And the Pitango founders actually, out of their own capital, supported that activity to understand how impact and tech actually can be blended. And in the beginning of 2020, I actually joined Pitango as the fund to integrate the world of impact and sustainability into mainstream Pitango. So we didn't allocate a specific pool of capital for impact investments. Instead, I built a strategy that looks at impact, ESG, the sustainable development goals, sustainability, all these alphabet soup that maybe we can talk about a little bit further, into mainstream Pitango activities. That influences how we screen companies, how we decide to make the investment, what we do with the companies afterwards, what we commit to in working with the companies, and what we expect the outcomes to be around ESG and impact. So my title is Head of Impact and Sustainability. I think it's probably one of the few such full-time professionals that are working in a mainstream VC with such a title. I hope it's going to be much more, and other VCs will join. But this is definitely an influence that I bring into the fund itself.
Yeah, great, and great that you are, here with us, because I believe you have great experience and you can present a bit, at least a bit, what's behind it. So now, Wiktoria, it's your turn. Please tell us more about you, about inStreamly, and about your funding experience.
All right. So maybe about inStreamly. I'm a co-founder of inStreamly. inStreamly, our big vision is to become the media mix of the metaverse and the media mix of the most native and human kind of marketing, so through creators. Because we believe that the only way for the metaverse to exist is if it's going to rely on millions of independent creators. But we are not only here for the buzzword. We already have implemented our technology or our vision of making it possible for brands to support and work with thousands of small creators instead of going with one celebrity in live streaming, in gaming live streaming. We basically helped over 50,000 gaming live streamers to work with over 120 brands like Netflix, Samsung, Acer, Adidas, etc. in over 12 markets. And yeah, we are expanding our vision and what we've done in live streaming into the metaverse as it will be developing. Uh, Up until now, we have raised in total around 1.6 million euro from a pre-seed round, a seed round, and via a couple of angels. And we'll be looking to raise a Series A in 12 to 18 months from now. So we've been fundraising in multiple ways, not only in equity, but also convertible notes. I personally, as a co-founder, focus on marketing and also fundraising. I run a lot of the fundraising process, from making decks to getting in touch with investors and taking the calls. The negotiations of terms, fortunately for me, lies on my co-founder, Maciej, the CEO. So I know a bit about the law and let's say negotiations bits of it, but not an expert on that.
Yeah, sure. But I'm so happy that you are here with us, and as a woman, you can present us what's your experience. And here I will read one question for you, because I don't want to forget about the number. But the question will go to Cecile. So, according to Women in VC and IDC report in 2021, all women-founded startups raised just 1.8%. 1.8% of investment in Europe. 9.3 went to mixed gender funding teams, while all men funding teams raised 89% of funding. So the numbers are huge. I was so surprised when I read them, and I couldn't believe, because I know so many women that are running these startups, and suddenly I see this data and I'm so, whoa, that's really impressive. So Cecile, why do you think it does look like that? What can we do? What you are doing to change these numbers?
Yeah, it's very glum numbers, and it's not getting any better. Actually, through the pandemic, we saw even less funding of women. It's always the gazillion-dollar question, right? Everybody's asking why is that and how can we solve it. I don't have one answer, but I think it's a combination of many, many, many factors that we all have some influence on. And obviously, some of the influence is long-term, some is mid-term, and some is short-term. So thinking about, for example, how do we increase participation of funding into women founders and co-founders? In order to have more investments in women, you have to have women sitting around the table on the investor side. The numbers are very low on the investor side as well in terms of women representation. And for example, in Israel, I think maybe 12% of VC professionals are women. And it's probably the same in other countries. So when you don't have a woman sitting at the table, then it's less likely that the investment will take place, because there is a bias, unconscious, sometimes conscious, because there is a different way of presenting companies that some people don't relate to, because there's all kinds of reasons that are hard to connect. There is a cultural difference between men and women, and it's harder, and that's how we got here. So one thing we're doing, for example, right now in Israel, we founded together with two entrepreneurs what we call the VC Academy, and we train women for venture capital roles. We are already at our second cohort, so we already have 25 alumni, and the second cohort is now taking place. We were the first fund to actually initiate this and support it, and we're creating the content. We're also delivering the content. We have partners of the fund coming in and speaking to the cohort and teaching things that you can't learn anywhere. Think about, where can you actually learn to be a VC? Nowhere.
Who can join this school, this academy?
So right now it's an on-site academy, so it's only in Israel. But we are thinking about launching something which is more online, that can be more inclusive, and we're hoping that other VCs will initiate similar programs in other countries, and that entrepreneurs will pick it up and actually create this model and just replicate it in other countries, because it's also a little bit local. So there is a local aspect to it. So first of all, we train women to be in venture capital. Number two, we create a lot of office hours and presentation opportunities for women founders, even though we might not be investing in them right now, but to give them the opportunity to present to the partners of the fund and create and get some feedback, see what's missing, and then they can catch up later when they're done a little bit more progress. So these sort of office hours are very important, because they give the perspective of the investor in a very I would say clean situation, because we say upfront that this is not an investable company for us, but we will listen to your pitch and we are going to tell you what we think about it and what needs to be improved in order to be more fit for VC. So it's kind of a nice and clean environment, and we can leverage that to have some more impact. Third, we work with a lot of women networks, women founders networks, and of different kinds, mostly in Israel, but not only. For example, this network, Strong Women in IT, is one of them. And at least I try to participate in as much public speaking as I can, to really coach founders and give them, I hope, good advice for them to go forward. So that's on the short term. Okay, the short term is just increase the pipeline, make sure that there's a woman sitting at the table when entrepreneurs present, and give as much advice and as much open doors as possible. Midterm, we have to create more women in the pipeline. So either by including more women in management teams of companies when we do invest in these companies, and they are still not the founders, but in the management team, of including them in the process. And that way they are a little bit more familiar with the process and what it looks like to raise capital, and who do you speak with, and what do the investors expect, and and when they're in the process, it will make it easier for them someday to set up their own venture, and they will be more knowledgeable. Another thing is to be as open and transparent as possible about what you need to do in order to get funded in the future. Encouraging more women to go and take management positions. How can women take management positions in startups? By providing, for example, parenting leave for men. That's, for example, one way to encourage our companies to provide the parental leave for men and women. That way, it's not only the women that have to stay home with the baby, but actually they can go back to work. And also when the fathers are there to take care of the babies, it creates more of an equal working environment, and it creates more knowledge and maybe more affinity for the men to understand the position of the women, and that way help them really get along and not get stuck in that ladder of progress within the company because they're going out to have a family. So that's being more inclusive in the companies, as well as continuously tap into talent that can be brought into the companies in management positions. So talk about women in management positions in all the companies, and push the companies to recruit as many women as possible in management positions, because we think this is the next generation of entrepreneurs. And of course, long term, it's about the education. It's about young women looking at STEM education, looking at entrepreneurship classes, looking at the high-tech ecosystem as something which is not 100% based on technology. Wiktoria doesn't seem to be a technology person. She handles the other parts of the business, which are not less important. So if you are from a different upbringing and education, it doesn't mean you cannot be a part of this industry. So it's really, in many levels, a concerted effort. And we also have the responsibility ourselves as women to make sure that we try, we apply, we are overcoming our barriers, our own barriers, thinking that maybe we don't fit, maybe we're not good enough, maybe we're not as sharp as a man entrepreneur, and actually go for it. That's something that we also need to work on ourselves. Sorry for
Yeah, that's true. Honestly, if you will have this venture academy online, definitely write me. We will promote it. I maybe join because it's something that really interests me. Because I am also advisor in one venture capital in US, and I must say that this is something that I strongly believe in. That this is how it should go, and this is why we have this community to promote women in tech at C-level and managerial position to show that there's a lot of us there. I have PhD in social science and I work in tech for the last 12 years, so you don't have to be tech. Let's say you don't have to have tech education. You have to be tech oriented. You have to be tech interested, and that's the key. So thank you for what you're doing, Cecile. Wiktoria, can you present us your experience with fundraising? How does this look like? Because you mentioned that you meet with ventures.
Yeah, I wanted to add on top of what Cecile said, because I do agree that support group, mentorship, and first of all, visibility of women in tech is crucial and important to inspire other people to give knowledge. But also the change in how many women get funded needs to happen within the VC world, because no amount of mentorship can change the decisions of the investors. So I also wanted to show an interesting insight into that. I read an article in Harvard Business Review about how the questions that VC asks influences how much funding that the startup gets. And in general, they found out by analyzing TechCrunch Disrupt pitches that most women were asked prevention questions, so questions how they will prevent getting their business down, and men were asked promotion questions. So for example, how do they want to acquire customers, what is their big vision, etc. So women get asked how long it will take for you to break even, and men are asked like how do you plan to monetize it, or women are asked how predictable are your future cash flows, and men are asked what are your major milestones you are targeting. So women are asked how they will prevent failure, and men are asked what is their vision of success. And just changing the questions, because then they did an experiment and they found out that the question that was asked and the answer influenced the funding that startups got from, because they made an experiment with investors and also like normal people. They got amount of money they could allocate to different startups answering questions a different way. And they found out that even when you were asked a prevention question, so the question that indicates failure and how you will prevent it, you were always given less money. And on the other hand, if you were asked a prevention question but replied in a promotional way, so they asked you about how you will not fail, and you talked about how you will reach success, how big you can be, etc., you got more money. So one thing is getting VCs to recognize this bias, to recognize what kind of question they ask, what kind of answers they expect. But also on the other hand, and this is when mentorship comes in and sharing knowledge, is getting founders to, especially female founders that tend to be more like tend to try to prevent a lot of failures. They think about different aspects of how they can prevent this failure, etc., to get them into more of this I can do everything mindset and selling this mindset to investors. And in my experience fundraising, I think we learned it hard way, and not only as a female founder, but as a founder from Europe. When talking with American VCs or US VCs, they expect, and because this is way the startups work in US, is that you come and you say, I'm gonna build something that will revolutionize the whole internet, is gonna be a $100 billion company. And then the investors know that they just need to divide it by 10, maybe by 15, and it's still a good company. It's still a $10 billion company. And then come founders from Europe, and they come in and make realistic, like they say what's realistic to them. They don't come in and say we're gonna be the next Facebook, because it's highly unlikely, but they come with realistic expectations of still a huge business, and they pitch a business that's gonna, and say we're gonna be a $1 billion company. And what US investors hear, okay, so it's they gonna be a $100 million dollar company. And women do this even more, so they tend to be very realistic. I also have this inside me that I do not like to oversell myself. I like to realistically state the statistics, that the reality, and not sometimes promise a big vision that is just a promise. And learning that to be able to frame your vision and also to pursue it in a way that is huge was a biggest change in my fundraising process and thinking about fundraising. But I do think that the younger the female founders are, the more bold they are with what they want and what they envision, and I think this is a very good sign for us.
So we should be more optimistic, more sell vision, not only real business we are running on right now.
Absolutely.
It's good to tell about the reality right now, but investors are investing in your future, not your MVP right now.
Yeah, true. Cecile, what are 3 no-goes that you have when it comes to investing money in a certain startup? In, I don't know, market cap, some problems with founders. What are 3 no-goes that you won't invest money in a certain startup?
So first of all, it depends whether this is an early stage startup or a growth company. Because early stage startups, they sell the dream, and growth companies sell a market that exists and their plan for expansion and scale, which is a very different conversation. For early stage startups, so first of all, it's always the team. Okay, the team is like the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 10. Because certainly in an early stage startup, you invest in the people knowing that their technology might not work, their market might not be the market which will eventually be the right one. It will take them time to find their product market fit. They will need to be flexible. They will need to work together. Many entrepreneurs are not single entrepreneurs. They come in 2 or 3. So how is the dynamics between them? They will need to get along for a long time. They will need to go through the whole roller coaster of setting up an early stage startup, which is tough on your personal life also. So they need to be resilient. So they need to be like marathon runners that are doing sprints. Okay, like running a marathon in sprints. It's a very, very difficult kind of people. The grit, the resilience that comes with it. It's not easy. So I think the people are really the most important thing. And if you have a slight feeling that these are not the right people, or the dynamics between them doesn't work, and you need to meet them a few times to know that, or you get some really bad recommendations from the market, people that worked with these people and say things about them which are not so good, or you've had like within the meetings with the founders, you feel that they're not very cooperative, and they won't listen to you, and they say they know best for everything. This is a big no. So I think the team, and what you feel about the team, what you find out about them, some gut feeling about it, which is, by the way, where the bias is. So the gut feeling of women towards men is not the same as men towards men, and vice versa. So I understand much better where Wiktoria is coming from in terms of saying, okay, I want to show a realistic view of where I'm going and not just sell a big dream, whereas the men would feel totally different about that. So the team really is like big no if there's a problem there. Then obviously we're looking for authenticity. So if the founders came in and said, okay, we're going to go into this market because it's, we, whatever reason, we think we're better than others, or nobody thought about this idea, and this is our solution, but actually it exists and they just didn't do their research well, and they just don't know where they are in terms of their position and what's going on in the market, that's a pretty bad indication. I mean, you can be wrong, and you can come with a history of failure, which is also okay. Failure is part of success, and a lot of people fail their first and second company until they get to the point where they know exactly what they're doing. And we're not afraid of failure, but getting it all wrong, like the picture wrong from the start, means something about you as a person. So if you can't really come in with something that then. And we can, we're going to be doing a due diligence. So if we feel that it's totally off, then it says something about you, right? So that's probably a big no-no. For growth companies, I think it's very important to see how the company has been built so far, and what was the plan and what was the execution, and if there's a big gap between where the company is going and what they thought they were going to be doing and the actual execution. If it's a gap that you can easily fit in because, maybe timing was wrong, or they approached the wrong market, and you can bridge it by understanding where you're going from now, fine. But if it's something that you feel that is totally off, and it's not really going in the right direction, and the founders they keep going in the same direction without even noticing maybe that it's wrong, or they notice but they keep going anyway, that's a big could be a very big problem. I would also say who is around the table is also important. Investing in a company is it's matrimony, right? It's like a long-term relationship, and you want to be aligned with the other people sitting around the table, the other investors, the other founders. You want to work in consensus. You don't want to force the company. And don't forget that VCs never hold a majority of the shares in companies. They always have could be a significant minority or a small minority, but it's always a minority. So we always have to work in collaboration with others, and we want to complement each other. So we understand there are going to be other people in the board and other people involved, and we all want to work together and make sure that we understand, or we have an open discussion about what we understand the reality to be, and not getting into a company where you have other investors that are always in conflict with everyone, and they are trying to be too aggressive or things like that. So that, those things, and obviously the terms are also important, all right? So if the valuation is totally off the charts and that doesn't fit our investment strategy, then we wouldn't do it. And certainly, from my perspective, we will not invest in harmful companies. So avoid harm is our basis. We try to go to benefit stakeholders and contribute to solution, which is a system for impact investors. It's called the ABC system. But we will never invest in companies that is harmful. So no gambling, no weapons, no fossil fuels, no offensive cyber, none of the companies that could create harm. So we have a clear divestment policy around that, and make sure that the companies cross a threshold of what we believe is not an ESG risk. If there's an ESG risk, that's also going to be a big no-no.
Yeah, great. Wiktoria, so what is your formula for success? How, if you could, give some suggestions, some direction, how it is best to prepare your pitch deck, what's important when you have some maybe not the negotiation, but maybe some just simply opening the discussion with the VC, what's important to prepare, what's important to show during such a meeting? Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Maybe I will not share you the pitch deck formula because there are like millions of articles already about that. But I'll share things that those formulas do not share. So the first thing, once you get your pitch deck, be ready that it will change 25 times, and be ready to make it shorter. If you think that you need 80 slides, it's not true. Our first pitch deck had 80 slides, the second half had 25, the next one had 20, and right now we are at 14. and the company is growing, there are more products, more things to share, and make it shorter. Find out what's important. And what's important when you first pitch your company is not the details of your product. The whole idea of how your product works is very important, but don't go into detail of how each things work. The investors, from what I have learned, want to understand a couple of things. That you found a really interesting problem to solve in a really big market, and you have an idea about how to solve it. And how you're actually making this idea happen is very important, but at the later stages. At the first pitch, you have to spark their attention. Remember that the pitch is about building attention. The same way you don't buy a thing after just one interaction, and you have to sometimes go deeper, research the features, etc. This will happen with VC as well. But at the first pitch, and your pitch deck is there to spark attention and to make people think, oh, this is something big. Why is nobody working on that? Oh, they are working on that. And if nobody else is doing that, this is something to invest in. And you want to capture this thought. The second thing is do the practice. So try to get as many people, probably it's best if they are investors themselves, to give feedback to you to how you pitch it, how you talk about it, and to give feedback to your deck. And prepare a list of questions that you will be asked. There are also a list of questions that VCs most likely ask, and have a good, quick, short, and interesting answer to those questions. Because basically every pitch will look 90% of time the same. You will be saying the same things, you will be answering the same questions, and get ready to just be able to deliver this with a smile, with conviction, and have the best answers. And be ready that it's gonna be a lot of work to do, and nobody else can do it. And the next thing is, after you get feedback, after you get answers to your questions, be able to iterate. Every time we do a round, I think, change our deck around 20 times. We change the way we answer our questions around 20 times. And if you have a co-founder, have your co-founder pitches as well, because I pitch inStreamly, and also my co-founder Maciej pitches inStreamly. And we do it in a bit different ways. And sometimes his way works better, and sometimes my way works better. So it's good to also see how other people you work with can convey the same message, the same answer to the same questions, the same pitch, focusing on very different things, and see what works. This is just testing. And the last thing, I think that it's a long process. You should be always open to learning, open that you will not always get feedback that can be actionable, because if you get feedback, you are too early for us from a pre-seed fund. It's sometimes not the feedback that's really the case, and be ready for just a lot of work iterating on that. And I think this is not always really underlined, because you only see the big runs, the announcements, but you don't hear that most of startups are in touch with around 150 VCs. They had talks with 150 VCs, heard 149 no's, and got one yes. And then you just see announcement about just one yes and this couple of million, and you don't hear the story about the 149 no's.
Wow. Can I add one thing to Wiktoria's speech, which is perfect?
Actually, yeah, absolutely.
So just small things. Number one, in this day and age, you have to add to your presentation how you see your impact, and mention ESG. Think about internally how you're going to build a company that is diverse, that is conscious of your carbon footprint and the influence you have on our planet, and that will be compliant with upcoming regulation, whether it applies to you or not. Because even if the regulation doesn't apply to you as a small startup, it applies to your customer, and they will apply it on you. So you will need to be, as part of their supply chain, you will need to be in line with SFDR, TCFD. So it depends where you are. So I think it's very important that the pitch deck includes your reference on ESG. And if your product actually has a positive impact on society, please use the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals and actually just mention it. I think even VCs that don't really practice it yet, they know they want to, they know they need to, and they will be happy to boast that they have a company in their portfolio that actually has a significant impact. So don't forget to add that into your pitch deck. Second, the dynamics between the partners, the founders, is very important. When I see two founders coming in and pitching, and every time one of them is pitching, the other one is looking at his phone and doing something else, I know that they don't listen to each other. Now, I realize that they've done this show 150 times already, and it's boring. It is boring. However, you still have to be in the moment. You have to relate to each other, complement each other, and make sure that we as the investor look at you as a team. And if we think that every time that one of you is going to say something that the other one finds boring, you're going to just go off to something else, not a good sign. So just make sure to stay focused for that hour that you're seeing, because the same way that you're making this pitch 150 times, we are seeing thousands of companies and 150 pitches to us from different companies. And the way that we will remember the ones that are going to be making the most impression on us is going to be how they presented, who they are, how is the dynamics between them, how passionate they were about their idea, and how big is the idea and the problem that they're trying to solve, and how unique they are.
Great. I think that this webinar should be watched, by everyone who is raising money. So thank you for such insightful answers. Wiktoria, I have one question regarding how you decide who is pitching your presentation in front of investors. Though it's like this is in sales. Sometimes when there is a woman in front of you, you are pitching. Or if there is a man, you decide that your co-founder is pitching. How you replace yourself here? How you change or decide who is exactly pitching today?
Usually we are not together on the call, and the reason that we are splitting the pitching between ourselves is because it's a lot of work and a lot of time consumed during those calls. So we just like to split it to people so one doesn't feel overwhelmed. And I say that we should do more around choosing who should cater to which audience. Usually we don't do that. Usually we are like, whose lead it is, the person takes it, and if one side cannot take it, we just move it to the other person. I think it would be beneficial for us, because in the end we live in a world that works like this, and we can be angry about that, but that's the way it is. That probably an old guy would be more keen to listen to a bald guy with a mustache over 35, and not a 25-year-old girl that looks even younger than she is. But we don't do that. Like we should do it, but we don't have time to think about it. In the end, they will need to invest in me as well. So it doesn't matter who is pitching. I do think that from what I saw, even though I am recognized and people want to talk or outreach to us because they have seen me, most of our investors were a lead that was started by my co-founder. Out of 5 investors already, the investments of 3 of them came because Maciej was the first one who take the call. Maybe not because, but Maciej was the first one to take the call. Maciej was the person leading it. If this is an indicator of some kind of bias, I don't know. But I do sometimes I did have calls when at the beginning I entered the call and I see the investor look at me, and I see on their face that they are half listening already. And then we went through, the product, the idea, and then to the numbers. And at the stage we really had as a early seed, we had very, very good traction. And we also still have very good traction. And this was the moment when they started opening their eyes and started listening with interest. So I think the bar for how do you get attention, how well respected are you, is quite high. And I do think it's unconscious bias. And this is the worst thing, because if somebody is an asshole that hates women, easy, they will just not invest in me. You know it, I know it. All right. But if this is something unconscious and they don't even notice that they are listening less to me, they are thinking that they are seeing more holes in what I talk about because I'm young and I'm a woman, and they don't know that this is something unconscious, this is the biggest thing. And I think if more VCs admitted, or more people in general, because we as women are as guilty. We are the same way. I once heard on a meeting a person who is running a whole foundation that's targeted to empowering women in tech. In some conversations, she told that, oh, I prefer to work with guys because women are always a drama. And this is unconscious. Like, she didn't see this as this bias that is the problem. And I don't blame her. But we should recognize, and everybody by default should recognize that we have this bias and have some things, some processes, some measures to prevent that, to remind yourself, to ask the right questions, to standardize the process for both kinds of founders. So I don't know. Probably there were at least a couple of times that somebody disregarded what we do because I was the one pitching, and I will never know that. And there were as many times when we got PR, media publications, interest from somebody because I am a young woman. So I try to find the ways to use this, sometimes a disadvantage, to my advantage.
Yeah,
you know,
you have to
Victoria, there's another research from the Harvard Business School that showed that VCs that have daughters have a better inclination to invest in women founders. Funny, huh? But it's true. They researched it. So you don't really know when you see maybe a 60-year-old man, maybe he has 3 daughters, and now he's decided to, not decided, but because it's unconscious, but all of a sudden something changed in his consciousness, and he will be more inclined to invest in women. But that's, and you know, one thing that you can do, since you're not in your pre-seed round anymore, you can leverage your existing investors and have them do the intro call to their friends from other VCs. And then when you come in, you're already past the first impression that you have to make, because they already made room for you in the conversation. So that's, I think you need to use that. And another tip, funds have different partners. Sometimes a fund and a partner are not the same thing. In funds, you have many partners. Sometimes the partner just isn't the right person. So when you approach a fund, make sure you approach the right partner. Do your research and find out what kind of companies this partner has invested in. Are they in your domain? Does he know much about it? Is he more inclined? Because you're not going to get a second chance with the same fund. Once they refused, you're going into the refusal basket. You're not coming back from there. So once you know which of the partners you want to pitch to, or if you're pitching through a funnel, like we have a system. You don't necessarily approach one particular partner, but if you can, then do that. And then, if possible, before you meet them, try to speak to a company, to a founder of a company that got an investment from that partner, and ask them what was important for this person. How, is it like the numbers game? Is it more on the technology and the hype? Is it more like something that it's new? What will excite him? And that is, or her. And that is, I think, very important information. And in a way, startups don't do their due diligence well enough. They come into the room, they know almost nothing about the investors. They're just grateful that they got this meeting, but it's not going to take you anywhere if you're not well prepared. And well prepared is not only about yourself and your pitch and how you do it. It's about who you're speaking with and what language are you using to make sure you make a good argument.
This is like in sales, yeah? So
yeah, you have to learn the customer.
Yeah, exactly. So Cecile, how does this decision-making process looks like in Pitango?
So It's a well, again, different. It's different between early stage and growth.
So let's focus on early stage startups.
Yeah, so just growth companies take a long time, and you have to research a lot, and there's much more economic work to be done, and research, and the analysts and principals in the growth fund are doing very, very economic kind of work, and then they go through different processes. For early stage, it's usually there's a due diligence happening, and obviously in the past few years everybody's been running after the most desirable startups. So these processes that used to take 2-3 months now have been condensed to 2-3 weeks basically, and you basically get the pitch deck. You try to speak to the founders as many times as you can, try to get a grip of what the technology is, what's the size of the problem, get as much information as you can. This is also why it's important for the relevant partner to be looking at the relevant investment, because then they don't have this learning curve to know about the domain, but actually they know already a lot about it. Maybe they made some investments already in similar domains. And then it's taken to the team, and the team has to agree unanimously that this is a good opportunity. When the team agrees, if it's not unanimous, we're not going to do the investment. But this is our fund. Maybe not all funds work the same way. Then when we have the team agree for that, they have to go to the investment committee. The investment committee will have an investment deck, which needs to be prepared really fast. And because we don't have time, we have to focus on the companies that we actually do want to fund, and create this thick document in which we try to do our best to research as much as possible, founders, market, technology, competition, all these things that Of course, we add at Pitango the ESG due diligence part, so the ESG risks and the opportunities, and what can be the impact opportunities of the company, and what is the risk of non-execution of these opportunities. And then that goes into the investment committee. Here too, the investment committee will have to be unanimous. However, they will still have a very strong say about the terms. So if the terms that are presented to them are not something that the investment committee agrees with, they might say to the partner, okay, so, the partner will be defending why he thinks it's a good idea to invest, convincing everyone. And then they might say something like, okay, we want to do this, but the terms are not acceptable to us, and this is what we'd like to change. And then the partner has to go back to the company and negotiate the terms and make sure that we are actually aligned with the terms, and then we can sign a term sheet. But we try to condense this process as much as we possibly can.
Wow. So it used to take 2 months. Now it takes 2 to 3 weeks. Why that fast? Why you are in such a hurry?
Because the market in the past couple of years has been such that there's been an abundance of capital around the table. So there's more and more VCs looking for opportunities. The market has matured. So there's more and more experienced entrepreneurs out there that are raising capital, and they've done 1 or 2 or 3 companies already in the past. And they know that they can fundraise easily, because if they've done this before, all they need to do is pick up the phone to their previous investor and say, okay, hey, we made this exit before. Now I'd like to set up a new company. It usually opens up the door very wide for them to come and pitch. And they are very sought after. So other investors are running after them in order to invest in them too. And they had until now the prerogative to choose which investor they would like. Obviously, in this beauty contest, if you will, the funds need to provide something that is additional to capital. So how we do this at Pitango, we actually have a whole value add team that looks at legal and finance and marketing and HR and impact and ESG and value creation. And all of that team is working with each and every company to make sure that they are supported in the best possible way, except for the board member that is always, of course, involved. So we work hard with our companies, and they appreciate it. And they know, because we already have a long-standing brand, that we are here for them even when things go bad. And, the market goes up and down. Companies don't always exit in 5 years. So we are here for them in the good times, but also in the bad times. And that's something that if you look at the testimonials of our founders, you will see that this is basically what they say. We know how to build big companies, and we're here for them even when it's tough. So that's
it's like a marriage.
Yes, but years back it was the other way around. Years back there was not a lot of money in the market, but a lot of startups, and then it was the reverse. So the market's like breathing. Sometimes the power is here, and sometimes the power is there. So that's the situation right now.
Wiktoria, when we've asked about your perspective, how long usually you raise money? How long does it take from like creating your first pitch deck to the final, signing the contract and having money on your bank account?
A lot of time, longer, and for us, longer than we would like it to be. The first round, like making a pitch deck, takes a month, 2 months. It depends on what are your expectations. The first pitch deck wasn't that long, but also wasn't that great. And the first round took us from, let's call it, from November to March, when we signed, or April. So with negotiations, it was around 6 months, 5 to 6 months. Then the second round, we were raising via convertible notes. So we started pitching in August, and the first signed convertible was in November. So it's 3 months, 4 months, I think. And then the next one was signed in January, and the next one was signed, I think, in March. And we announced the round in April. So it was like the whole process took time from August, only pitching because the deck was prepared before, till April of the next year. This time, we want to for sure do it in a quicker burst. Some people say that you should make it as fast as possible, choose the right funds to contact, and pick the top ones you want to work with, prepare a very personalized pitch and say, hey, we've sent it only to a couple of funds. We are reserving our spot, like a spot for you in our round. We want to let us know within 2 weeks if you want to go into talks or pass on the opportunity, and then go to the broad outreach. And we did it in a different way because we had pre-existing connections. So we first outreach to people when we were because we had an attempt, like a very bold attempt, and a very big Series A on a very big valuation right before the invasion on Ukraine happened. So, and the markets broke. So this was not the best timing, and we did it the other way around. We first contacted the, let's call it, tier B VCs, the ones that we would be all right with joining, but they were not like the top ones in the world. Just to test our pitch first, so see how people respond, get in talks, etc., and then go to tier A's after 2 weeks. And from all of it, for sure, we emerged stronger with a lot of conversations, a lot of feedback. We changed our positioning and broadened our strategy based on it, but it was very time consuming. So I'd say you have to prepare. It's going to take you 6 months with all the legals, only due diligence with the fund that already said yes, and the negotiations, it takes 2 months. And after due diligence, they can still say no, or at the point of negotiations. There was once a fund we were in after the due diligence, and we are at the step of negotiation of the contract, and they offered some clauses that were just a no-go for us because they weren't, maybe predatory is a big word, but they were not founder friendly, especially for founders that have a couple of investors, because every time you give some kind of good thing for a new investor, probably you have to do it as well for your other investors. And things that wouldn't be necessarily bad when you have just one investor are worse when you have a couple of them, because it messes up the whole dynamic. And they pulled out, like we pulled out from the negotiations, because it was a must-have for them, a no-go for us, and it was another 1 month and a half of costs, also legal costs, wasted. So 6 months at least. If you are lucky, you can do it sooner. A lot of people do it sooner, but for a lot of people, it takes sometimes over a year. You just don't hear it often. But yeah, it's a time-consuming thing for a
It's also a
founder.
big difference between first-time funders, first-time entrepreneurs, and experienced entrepreneurs. That's really where the line is drawn.
It is and it isn't, because we, as a team of founders, like we have a second or third time founder experience as entrepreneurs. I am youngest, but the rest of guys either worked at big companies, or Maciej co-founded two companies already and exited them in a successful way. So it wasn't like this that we were just fresh out of college and rising, but for sure, the more connections, the more network, the more experience you have, the easier it's gonna get, and the less known you are, the less experience you have, it's gonna take the longer for sure.
We have one question from Marlena. How many VCs did not reply at all to your deck, Wiktoria? Do you know that
Did not
numbers?
reply. It's gonna be in hundreds. I think it's gonna be around 120. We cold mailed, and we usually do this cold mails in a well researched way. So always when I hear that you should research a VC, knew who to approach, write a personal message, yes, you should do it, but it doesn't guarantee anything. And you do it for us, cold mailing like didn't work. Only intros from somebody else, etc. Cold mailing can be very powerful, but when you hear that you should just craft a perfect personalized email, it will work. Usually it will not work, but when it works wonders. We have been on calls with around 100 VCs. I'm talking from pre-seed to Series A, so it's like a lot of a big span of probable VCs, with some of them on multiple calls. So you can expect that we have spent at least 200 hours, 220 hours as founders on calls with VCs already.
And you're right
Wow.
about the cold emails. So it's always better to find someone who knows someone who can write an intro,
Yeah.
or just sell, and not cold emails don't really work in the majority of the times.
Yeah, so network is the key. So ladies, we are run out of the time, but maybe if you wanted to sum up in in a few sentences what our audience would like to remember, have in mind regarding funding, raising money, what would it be? So Cecile, do you have some summary of your pitch today, our discussion?
I don't know. I think it's all the things we discussed today are really important. I think be bold. Make sure that you are. Sorry, the cat's tail is getting in the way. I see Victoria has a dog, so I'm not alone. So really be bold and show your vision. Try to reach as many people in a targeted way as possible through connections. Make sure that you are passionate and don't lose your passion, even though you've been pitching the same thing for 150 times and 220 hours. Don't lose it. Find women. Some funds do have women partners. Try to find them and see if they can be of help, or if they can make the connections. Like I'm not on the investment teams, for example. I participate in the due diligence, but first they go to the investment teams. But when it comes through me, and I transfer the deck to the investment teams, it's better than just writing a cold email. So all these things are, I think, things we discussed, and Wiktoria really nailed it, like one by one, and I'm sure she's going to go very, very long way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So from my summary, Cecile already said that the future favors the brave and the bold. So I will add one of my favorite mottos. So don't be afraid to suck at something new. It's a learning process. It's time consuming. Just be patient. Be the biggest believer of your idea. Don't let any kind of feedback, rejection, or just like silence make you believe less in what you're doing, because you are the first one and you are there to prove the majority of people wrong, because the majority of people will not believe at the first glance. And it's all right, because the best ideas came out of people saying at first that this is impossible and it's not gonna work.
Great, perfect. Ladies, I'm so moved. I'm so happy that we had this webinar about raising money. I'm so thankful that you had time to share your experience, and I hope that you, our listeners, take as much as possible from this webinar. Thank you, Cecile. Thank you, Wiktoria, for being with us today. And
Thank you
next
so
month
much,
we are going to.
Anita.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So next month we are going to talk about metaverse and the future of this completely new way of communication. So thank you once again. I hope that everyone can find you on LinkedIn or Facebook. What is the best way to find you, girls?
Probably
Ladies?
LinkedIn.
I think LinkedIn, yeah.
Great. So thank you once again, and see you in a month. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.